Hey everybody, my name is Michael McDowell. I want to tell you a little bit about Re-Envisioning Rigor. I want to start with the story. So when I was younger, like 18 years old, I was a lifeguard and I was actually training other people to be lifeguards. And one of the things that was really important on teaching others how to be lifeguards is walking them through step-by-step approaches to things like getting on and off of a lifeguard stand, right? Like how do we approach the lifeguard stand and how do we make sure we're always keeping our eyes on those swimmers that were in the pool? It was really, really important that we were able to walk new trainees, so new lifeguards through this particular work. And even for some of us that were veterans, it's trying to remember that, remember, you got to stick to these small, doable like routines and not kind of getting lax and be like, oh, I've got on the stand, I've watched this over and over, because you could miss a swimmer that might need some help. So these step-by-step guides were really important. So Aaron Iceberg and I, my co-author, we used to coach swimming together. We coached high school swimming, and we would be doing the same things with swimmers. We would actually be breaking down steps to help swimmers swim, the various types of strokes that we were working in. And I remember that when I was, and we would do this with like, teaching them like how to do squats and like how to do, what we would call, so working out like on land, and then we'd get into the water. But we really were trying to be as specific as we possibly could to give people feedback. And this was just from our experiences as athletes, but also in our previous jobs. And then when we went into teaching, so I taught high school biology, he taught elementary science. So he did chem and physics and earth science and all of that for elementary students. What we found is that we went to a lot of like professional development, and it was all conceptual. It was like differentiate, or it would be things like do formative assessment or build student agency or make sure kids are clear or tier one or deep learning. And that was very conceptual. And we were always like, well, what do you want us to actually do? Like, what are the steps that actually make this more effective? Because interestingly enough, almost everything in education works. So how do you make sure that the things that work really, really well, how do you make sure you execute them well? Imagine if we did this with someone that was starting with swimming, like kick from your hips or pull or finish through. While all of those things make a lot of sense if you have a ton of background knowledge and you've done a lot of work on step-by-step guidance around it, if you don't know these things, you're now left to your imagination of how do we actually go through this kind of work. So we wanted to dig a little bit deeper of like, how do we make this observational? How do we actually see this particular type of work? Because as we've been traveling around the world doing professional development and going in and like coaching, looking at classrooms, talking with principals, assistant superintendents, directors, and talking a little bit about what are the specific things that we want to do around professional learning, we found that a lot of teachers were actually super frustrated about that kind of work. So we had this idea. I don't know if those of you who are listening to this or watching this have seen just the outcrop of, there's just so much growth around graphic novels. And they've actually been really, really helpful for my own kids, because when they're assigned books that they may not have a lot of background knowledge, so you think about things like To Kill a Mockingbird or some of Ernest Hemingway's books that I look at now, as an adult and say, well, those make a ton of sense for me. But sometimes kids are struggling with like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Sometimes those graphic novels can be really supportive. I'm not saying only graphic novels, but sometimes those can be really helpful. So what we decided to do is we decided to say, look, how do we take that conceptual stuff and actually make it practical into some small doable steps when we're doing professional learning, whether that's brand new teachers or a veteran teacher that wants to start a new practice, or just kind of maybe just get a little bit better, like refining a little bit around their current practices. And so we started to build these 4-step practices, kind of like lifeguarding or swimming, or, really anything where you're like, I just want to get better in small and doable ways and really focus on consistency and precision within that particular work. And that's what we started to develop. And we've been starting to do professional development around this. Sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's in person, but we're really looking at small, doable practices over time and making sure that people can see it. So we started doing this work, and it looks something like this, where we break things down into 4 simple steps. We make sure that we're providing some level of graphical representation with very simple comments or quotes or suggestions that we can look at and be like, okay, that makes sense. That would be step 1. That would be step 2. And we just kind of start moving through it. So you get teacher comments, you get student comments, and you get a description over time, so people can just start to see, all right, these are the steps that we take. So this new book that we've come out with, it's a very small book. It's less than 100 pages. It has a number of different practices. It provides a dashboard that lets you know what's the impact of this particular practice, what's the prep time for me, what's the implementation time. It gives you a description of what that practice looks like. And then it gives you those 4 steps, what we call a 4 square, to be able to actually run this. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So if you're in a PLC or new teacher orientation, or you're just as a teacher saying, look, I want to just get better at helping students with developing clarity, you can do that. And again, it provides contextual cues through those comment bubbles, shares a description, it lays out each specific strategy. It's super simple. And we really wanted to create images that were not too complicated. They were just like, you could look at this and be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's what I do. And that's really what we wanted to create. So we created 24 practices to start. And those 24 practices come through teaching students to learn how to learn. So how do they actually get better at being like, okay, I know where I am in my learning. This is how I get better. Helping kids like learn the basics. We call that surface, but that seems a little conceptual. So learning the basics, like procedural fluency, like how do we add fractions? Meeting the standard. Most standards are relating ideas together. We call that deep learning, but that's relating ideas. So that's where you get that analysis. So breaking things apart, synthesis, putting things together, evaluation, like understanding the pattern, and then going beyond the standard. That's really transfer. How do I take what I've learned and apply that into multiple situations? So we've done that through 24 practices. So we have 6 practices in each of these particular buckets of work. And all of these are really helping students to strengthen surface, deepen, transfer. All of these protocols have been tested in classrooms. We've collected evidence in schools. We've looked at evidence from all of the various research that you might be pulling from in education. We have lots of practical examples. And then we're only implementing practices that we think can be routines that you could do each day, not big events. Not like, oh, I could do this like once every month, but really something that you could do once every day or at least once or twice a week. And we really wanted to make sure we picked those types of practices. There's going to be 3 books. We're going to have this first book. We'll have 24 practices. We'll have another one that'll be coming out in the spring of 2025. And then we'll have another one that'll be coming out closer to summer 2025 with another 24 practices. And then eventually we'll have more. We have another whole, number of like 150 of these just that we're starting to kind of build and sketch out and create over time. And then we'll work on developing those illustrations. So if you're interested in this particular type of work, and I would strongly suggest that this is an easy field guide that a PLC could just lay out, new teachers could lay out, an expert teacher could say, okay, I want to get better on students working harder in feedback than me, or at least working as hard as me. This might be something to just pull apart and be like, okay, well, I'm going to try those 4 steps. I'm going to execute that for a few weeks and see where we're going. So if you'd like to pick up a copy of this book of Re-Envisioning Rigor, Powerful Routines for Promoting Learning at High Levels, you can get that QR code. You can go to mimiandtoddpress.com and you can pick up this book. This will be available later in November 2024. So we're only talking like 3 weeks away. And again, simple, short book, just short, sharp strategies that you can pull in, that you can do. So thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll talk soon. Take care. Bye. It's going to be great.